So a couple of weeks ago, Aditya and I saw an excellent article, and he actually pointed it out to me, but he had not known that I had already looked at it and read it because it's a friend of mine that actually wrote the piece. He actually pointed it out to me and he said, Khalid, just check this piece out. It's an excellent piece. It was on ESPN's Cricket Monthly, the Cricket Monthly from ESPN Cricinfo. And it was a piece about Faf du Plessis, something very different to what we are currently used to in the current media. You don't normally see articles that are going so in depth to describe a man and a phenomenon like Faf was. An excellent leader he was. There's an other side to him that we maybe didn't know about that we see in this particular article. If you haven't spoken to Faf before and gotten deep into his history and learned about his past, I don't think you would have known this information. Now, reading this piece, it will tell you everything that you need to know about Faf du Plessis. An excellent piece by Daniel Gallan. I call him a friend, a colleague, and someone that I've really gotten to know well over the years, and someone that I continuously learn from just by reading his content and listening to him speak about cricket. So the piece is called Faf du Plessis, In the Skin of a Lion. We're going to be talking about this with Daniel himself, as well as Aditya, on the show next. Hey guys, welcome to Let's Make the Team. This is the daily show. As per usual, I'm your host, Khalid. This is the show where we talk about all the major talking points in South African cricket. So, as you can see, Aditya is with us once again, as well as Daniel Gallan on the screen here. With you guys have seen him on the show before, but I thought it was an excellent idea actually by Aditya to get you on the show, Daniel, to chat about this particular article that you wrote. And I think where to start? Let's start with you. Welcome to the show once again. How are you doing? It's a long time since we've actually caught up.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's, as always, Khalid, always a pleasure to team up with you. I love collaborating on your podcast, on your videos. Yeah, it's been an interesting time. I became a father 3 months ago, which has been. Thank you, which has been pretty life-changing. So if I look exhausted and haggled, that's the reason why. Getting no sleep, but he's been such a joy. And yeah, the freelance hustle never stops, right? Constantly grinding away, but now in a good space. The sun's out in London. We're experiencing something of a heat wave, which means it's about the mid-20s. But yeah, life's good, man. Happy to be on the show.
I wanted to know, did he come out of the womb with a batsman's grip already?
Well, we were joking about it. We were saying how he's born to a South African father, but born in England, which means he's almost certainly going to play for the Three Lions one day.
Oh, wow. Excellent. We're going to see another guy playing for the opposite team, but obviously he's born in England, so we can't really claim him like we tried to claim so many other players in the past.
Yeah, exactly.
Aditya, nice fresh new cut. I'm liking it. Welcome to the show as well to you. I'm going to give the first question, obviously, to you because I really want you to get this conversation started because I know that you really enjoyed that piece. I mean, I read it for a second time today, just to refresh and get in to know everything about it again before I interview Daniel. Because I think what I loved about this piece, Daniel, and it's not what I normally see in pieces. Is normally these type of pieces or features on particular players are normally about a specific event or a specific thing that's happening in the modern day era or something that is happening in cricket today. But this was something that was still relevant today, but also something that you can go back and read again. It's an evergreen piece that you can read for years to come, I feel, because it speaks about Faf not only as a human being, but it also speaks about him as what he was like as a competitor, what he's like as a captain, as a cricketer, as all of these type of things. So it's something that I think is really important for anybody to be able to talk about over here. So, Aditya, I'm going to give you the first question to Daniel, if there's anything that you want to ask. But let me first start with Daniel. Just give us some insight into the way you went about this piece. What made you decide to write a piece like this about Faf?
Well, first of all, thank you for those kind words. I mean, what you're saying, writing an evergreen piece, getting beneath the character that we see in press conferences on the field. I mean, that was certainly my intention. He was the captain of my professional career. When I started watching cricket, Heinz Crinier was the captain. Then it became Sean Pollock. I wasn't, I was still in school when Graham Smith took the role. Then when I started as a professional, as a writer, I didn't start off as a sports journalist. So even though I was writing and thinking about cricket in a literary way when Hashim Amla and A.B. de Villiers were in charge, I wasn't sitting in the press conferences. I wasn't interviewing them. So the first press conference that I ever attended, Faf was in charge. And for me, I was always struck by the way he conducted himself in press conferences. That old line of, he's an athlete who answered your question when you asked him one. I think it's a line that journalists like to throw away but really what it comes down to is it reveals a sincerity. I think Faf du Plessis, despite his very alpha persona, always came across as a very sincere human being. I think he always cared very deeply about the people under his watch and the side. I think he cared very deeply about providing the journalist. I think he respected our time. I think that was certainly something that whether or not he felt, he certainly conveyed. And I found him to be such a juxtaposition, because on the surface he represented, like I said, of this quintessential alpha male. He had an 8-pack, he had a jawline that could cut glass, his hair was always out of place, he had those piercing eyes. If it wasn't for A.B. de Villiers, we'd probably talk about him as one of the most naturally gifted cricketers in the country, and I'm sure we'll talk about his parallels with A.B. growing up. So I always found that sincerity and his desire to be liked, even in insecurity, from a different angle. If you looked at that sincerity, it could be often misread as insecurity. And I always just found these two sort of contrasting narratives existing within him to be really fascinating. So I was eager to go out and see if I could marry those two disparate worlds that he seemed to exist in.
For the guys that are asking about the article is in the description. We put it in the description for you guys to go read if you want to go read it. You are asking for where you can find it, so I put it there. For Aditya's articles, just go to cricketfanaticsmag.com. You'll see all Aditya's articles over there as well. Aditya, take it over from here, because I know you were itching to ask some questions.
Well, first of all, Daniel, outstanding piece. I read it multiple times. And I was wondering, how did you decide on the various facets of his life that you wanted to cover in his piece? What really motivated that?
Again, thank you very much. Like I said, I started with an interview with Faf. Normally, when I write these pieces, I've for the Cricket Monthly, I've done one on Quinton de Kock, and I've done one on Aidan Markram, and I'm working on another one, which I can't say who just yet. I often come. They one of the lot. In fact, the players, as was the case with Quinton, the player was the last person I interviewed, and I always let the other people involved in the process, because normally I interview 4 or 5 other people that knew him, grew up with him, either played against him. I let those other people shape the narrative, and then I go back to Quinton and say, oh, well, Stephen Cook mentioned this anecdote. Could you maybe remember this? But for Faf, it was different. For Faf, I started with him, which meant that, like you say, intention is a good word. I had to start with the intention of marrying these two worlds, but it's hard to kind of recall the writing process. I guess I wasn't married to any particular anecdote. Obviously, the Abe de Villiers narrative was important for me. I wanted to touch on it. I wanted to go deeper. Faf was actually not so enthusiastic to go there. In fact, with a pre-agreed set of questions that I sent through his media officer, the Proteas media officer, I got back a screenshot with 2 big black lines crossing out my 2 questions directly pertaining to Abe de Villiers. So obviously that made me want to talk about it even more. I was interested in obviously the whole Sandpapergate series and that incident in the Kingsmead stairwell. But how could I not? Is there any other cricketer to diffuse a hostile situation with wearing nothing but a towel? I was interested in that alpha male persona, whether that was intentional or whether that was something that just fits him naturally. I was interested in his softer skills. I think he's a very modern captain. I think Graham Smith was perhaps the last old school captain that we will ever see, which is why I worry for someone like Dean Elgar. I wonder if Dean Elgar has the empathy, the softer touch, the understanding that people can't always give their best, even if they want to. I think Dean Elgar knows that sometimes someone's best isn't good enough, but he's someone who I think believes that you should always be giving 100% of your efforts. And I think Faf du Plessis, though he asked that of his players, I think he understood that if someone was going through a personal situation, if someone like Temba was carrying the weight of social responsibilities on his shoulders, sometimes giving 100% wasn't always possible. So I was just keen to get under the skin of the lion, as the heading says. That wasn't I can't take credit for that title, but whoever did it at ESPN deserves, I don't know, kudos, I should say. I was just interested to understand him as a person, and starting from there, kind of peeling back the layers of what he's like as a cricketer and various anecdotes throughout his life. I have one regret that I didn't talk enough about the ball tampering. His 2 ball tampering incidents. I possibly could have gone deeper into that, but he was quite willing and he spoke about it. So I think we touched on it enough in the piece. Did that answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Daniel, you might have had a similar type of experience, because when my first press conference as well was a Faf du Plessis press conference, and I felt the way he commanded a room, like he just commanded attention when he sat at that desk and he talking to us with mics on, whether he didn't have mics, whether he did have mics. He just captured everybody's attention in that room, and he'd always go. I felt, actually, as a younger journalist coming into the scene, I always felt that he took note of that. He took note of who the new guys are, who are not the new guys, who are the guys that are the old timers, who are not. He tries to remember majority of the people's names in the press conferences that are coming regularly, and he'd actually try and aid you in your own journey when you ask a question. Like, I felt that he almost gave me more in one of my first questions that I asked him. He actually almost gave me more than what I've asked for, and it's almost like, from that moment on, whenever you see him, he tends to remember what you do. But for me personally, is when I actually interviewed him for the first time. Of course, like the first time I actually interviewed Faf, the way, I mean, it's almost like, I don't know how to explain it. Like now I'm sitting in front of you. It's exactly how I was in front of him when he spoke to me for the first time. It's just it's something that you don't really get with anybody. I mean, there's many cricketers we've both spoken to, but I just think Faf gives a different type of. He has a different type of aura about him. I see him as one of the best captains that South Africa's had because of the time that he took over the South African cricket in time. I mean, he had to deal with a hell of a lot of pressure with regards to racial things, with regards to AB, whether AB's going to come, where AB's going. That must have been difficult on the entire team. Also, a lot of retirements happened while he was there. He had to deal with all of that, finding a way to blend a team that is also multicultural and multiracial, and also guys with different levels of talents. You've got a guy like Dean Algo compared to a guy like maybe someone that's more natural, like a Quinton de Kock, and having and different personalities, of course, as well, that he had to deal with in that dressing room. One iconic photo shows me about I think he pushed that idea of Ubuntu and togetherness and all of those things that we heard about. You would see it like with that one image that you have when he kissed KG on the forehead. I mean, that's something that we all remember. What I wanted to know from you with regards to Faf in this particular interview is, was there any moment where you sat there listening to him? Because, I mean, you've been to probably lots of press conferences with him. Obviously, we've been to lots of press conferences with him. But was there any moment in this interview where that really shocked you or wowed you when you were interviewing him?
That's a good question. I think what I found that he was certainly less guarded. I think that's just the nature of an exclusive chat. You know, we had to do it over Zoom, obviously. So, but even so, it felt more casual. I mean, it's not like he was every third word was a swear word, for example. But you know, it wasn't like that at all. But you know, he said a swear word, and that for me, like, he would never say that in a press conference, obviously. He was pretty candid about the way that some journalists had treated him, which is in the piece. I start off with his not confrontation, but his him taking issue with something that a senior journalist had written about him in the paper, and he felt the need that he wanted to kind of set the record straight. And I think press conferences and the relationship between athletes and the media is certainly, you know, a real talking point now. We've seen Naomi Osaka in the French Open pull out as a result of her relationship with press conferences and how people write about her. And then we saw, was it Serena Williams or Venus Williams saying, well, anyone can write about me because I know that they can't play tennis as well as me. And a lot of people got touched by both these things. And I would love to know what Faf thinks about that, because, and I actually asked Faf this, you know, what's it like when you're a highly elite, chiseled athlete facing Pat Cummins and Mitchell Stark, and you're pulling them in front of square with the front foot, and you got some 5 foot whatever overweight bald man, present company included, criticizing the way that you play spin. You know, that must surely rankle. You know, like I don't expect Quinton de Kock to come and criticize the way I construct a sentence or my prose. You know, like we all have different strengths, and he was very honest about it. He's like, yeah, you know, sometimes it pisses me off. Sometimes I don't like it when people do that, and when I feel like it gets personal, I will go say something. So I found that he was. What surprised me was that I interview people one-on-one all the time and in person, and I find that their character is very rarely is removed from the way that they are in press conferences, that they're still this polished, hyper-trained, media-savvy persona, and that's, to understand them, you kind of have to get a few beers in them. You know, that's always the trick for anybody journalists out there. Even if you don't drink, most of the athletes do, and if they don't drink, go take them out for a meal, get them with some food in their mouth or whatever the case is, just get them distracted. But with Faf, even though it was on Zoom and he was in a hotel in a very sanitized environment, I felt like he let his guard down slightly, and that's probably what led to some revealing anecdotes. I mean, just I know I'm rambling a little bit, but one thing that did surprise me was how he told me that him and his wife received death threats after the AB de Villiers ran out in the 2011 World Cup against New Zealand. It was his 10th. It was Faf's 10th ODI. South Africa one track. They well and truly choked there. If you want to talk about any of the chokes throughout South Africa's cricket history, this was the biggest one, I would argue. And the fact that he received death threats said that he built a wall around him and his family and his loved ones. So that was surprising to me, but more the way he conducted himself with me, the fact that he trusted me with his story, I thought that was really special.
Aditya?
You know, one thing I find fascinating about Faf, and it's something that you write in the piece as well, that he says that I know I'm not a great player, but I'm a good player. And for a guy who's essentially been a superstar since he was in age group cricket in school, that must be hard to come to terms with, because you look at, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you look at the records of South African batsmen after their first 20 tests. He had the second best average after Graham Smith. I think after 20 tests, Faf was averaging 51 or something like that, and his career average obviously was 40 by the time he finished. But somewhere you can tell that it was a combination of retirements, pressures, him going up and down the order in Test cricket, and really the inexperience around him. And I was wondering if you had any additional insight into how he viewed himself as a player.
Yeah, I found that comment interesting as well. Let's just for a second put his test numbers aside. In ODI cricket, he is a bona fide great of South African cricket. His numbers stack up with anyone else's. I think in the last 4 years, only Virat Kohli, Rohit Sharma, and Ross Taylor have scored more 50-over runs than Faf du Plessis. He's still a gun in T20 cricket. Leagues around the world are falling over themselves for his signature. I think, and this comes to that sense of insecurity that I think was quite palpable in Faf's narrative, was when you grow up constantly compared to AB de Villiers. Yes, I know he was slightly ahead of AB at school, but after they graduated, AB rocketed and Faf had a respectable trajectory, but he wasn't exactly tearing up trees the way AB was. I think when Faf was still playing for Northerns in what is semi-professional cricket in South Africa, AB was reading off back-to-back hundreds in tests against the West Indies, and then the year after, when Faf was still playing for Northerns, AB was hitting 100 and whatever against West Indies again in a World Cup. So when that's your best mate, when that's a guy who's going to become the best man at your wedding, when that's a guy who went to your school, who knows your family, who you probably played a million games of backyard cricket, there must have been times, and I know that there were times when Faf was lying in bed at night, maybe he spooned one to cover, or he played across the line for the Northerns and didn't make any runs, lying in bed just thinking, yes, man, my best mate's Protea, and not just any Protea. Like, he's AB de Villiers. Like, he's going to go down as an all-time great. I mean, AB de Villiers is certainly the best batsman I've ever seen with my own eyes. And I saw Brian Lara make a double at the Wanderers, and I saw Sachin Tendulkar, and we saw Adam blah blah blah. We've seen all the greats. I genuinely think AB de Villiers is the best I've ever seen. So I think that gave Faf du Plessis two things. I think it gave him humility / insecurity, where he was constantly measuring himself against an immeasurable variable. But I think it also gave him perspective. And I think he learned a lesson early on in his career, because what happens with a lot of cricketers is that they go to school and they're the best player in their team. They might be the best player in their league or their province, or certainly their age group. Then they go into semi-professional cricket and they're again one of the best. Then they go into provincial cricket, franchise cricket, and they're one of the best. And then they get to the Proteas, and they might still be one of the best, but they come up against Ravi Ashwin in India or Mitchell Johnson at Centurion. And all of a sudden now they've got the yips and they don't know how to play. And and for the very first time in their life, they're confronted with a conundrum that they can't quite overcome. And that can derail how many cricketers, Aidan Markram was this close to falling off a cliff because of a poor ODI series against India. He was that close. He was that close to get, after punching the door, we were like, is Aidan not going to make it? He might still not make it, because for the first time in his career, he bumped up against the ceiling where he had to himself try and burst through. Faf du Plessis was confronted with this notion that he is very much human very early in his life, before his career had even started. He came to realize that as good as you are, there is always someone better. So I think him saying, I'm a good cricketer, but not a great cricketer, I think it is partly him downplaying his own abilities. But I think it is also true. We use the word great and GOAT so freely that they almost lose their meaning. When we talk about AB de Villiers as a great, that word should mean something. You know, how many times will we, you know, Conway goes and scores another double in the next test. People were talking about him as the GOAT. You know, it's easy to use that term. I think Faf du Plessis got perspective early in his career, and that's what allowed him to continue down the path that he took, and not be derailed when he finally made the step up. And I think that 100 on debut that he made in Adelaide is testament to that.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap it up quickly. Just a final word about Faf. From what I've experienced in the time that I've spoken to him and what I've seen in press conferences and what South Africa's been through over the last 3-4 seasons, whenever there was an issue, Faf was out in the middle speaking about it. Whenever Cricket South Africa was in a crisis, journalists expect Faf to put out the fire. Whenever there was a player that was under scrutiny, Faf was there to put out the fire. Whenever there was anything got to do with, I mean, the way he handled the ball tampering saga over here in South Africa, the way he sat there in front of us, not having a dig at them, like many Australians would probably have done in reverse. He sat there and with humbly and spoke about it and was honest about it and actually asked us to be a little bit less. He reminded us that they are human beings too, and humans make mistakes. So I remember that press conference very carefully when he spoke about that, and very clearly when he spoke about that. Sorry. So I just think Faf is a human being as a captain, outshines his ability as a player, to the extent that we must remember him as a good captain and as a good human being, and then also as a good player, like you've explained. But Daniel, that piece was excellent. Thanks a lot for sharing that with us and doing all that hard work and continue grinding like the way you do. We're really excited to see the next piece, of course, and to get you on the show again to speak about it. To the guys out there in the comment section, as I said, that the article is in the description below. You can go to the description, go read that article. If you want any other articles that Cricket Fanatics Mag has written, go to cricketfanaticsmag.com, of course. Please smash that like button, share, comment, subscribe, share this with all your friends and family. Don't forget to press that notification bell, of course, for all future videos as well. So do that with us and join the family and join the community. We're getting closer and closer to that 2,000 subscriber mark. Thanks a lot, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks a lot, Daniel, for coming on the show. Thanks a lot, Aditya. And we'll see you again tomorrow with an Offside Maiden show with a very, very special guest. We're going to be having a very special guest on the show tomorrow. So please tune in. One of the best players in the world. So please have a look at that. Come and tune into that show tomorrow, the Offside Maiden show. Take care, everybody, and have a great weekend.